Since the dawn of man, humanity has lived in fear of one of the most destructive forces of nature. Often theorized to be the wrath of God, a man by the name Benjamin Franklin set out to prove lightning and electricity were two of the same, discovering that electricity was a natural force that could be tamed. Lightning in a bottle. Literally, after the historically iconic kite experiment, a simple spark taking place correspondingly with the Age of Enlightenment. It marked a paradigm shift that changed not only for America, but all mankind, shocking his fingers, and soon after, the world.
You win!
Supernatural became superstition, theory became science, evolution became revolution, and America became a force to be reckoned with. After the first commercially practical electric incandescent light bulb was officially created by Thomas Edison in 1879, it set in motion the Big Bang of our country, a single light bulb creating a snowball effect of others. Henry Ford, the Wright brothers, even eventually Albert Einstein skyrocketed the human race into the industrial age. Planes, trains, and even automobiles all became standard throughout not just America, but the entire world. Roads were paved, tracks were laid, even airports were made. The birth of transportation was electrifying to the hearts of the average bystander. So, why wasn't its power? After all, we wouldn't be here today without Big Ben. I mean, even to this day, we still run our phones, tablets, computers, even our own homes off of electricity. So, why doesn't everything else? While we normally talk about technology on this channel, we never really talked about where it came from. Or, more importantly, who it came from. The genesis of modern technology may have been solely responsible for a single man you most likely don't even know the name of. A person so taken advantage of, Elon Musk felt compelled to name his own energy company after him. This is the story of how literal power was stolen from us. This is the story of what happened when energy fell in the wrong hands. This is the fable of Nikola Tesla.
Say, where'd you get the cool belt, Buzz?
Well, Slotted Pig, they're standard issue.
The Greeks first discovered electricity about 3,000 years ago. Its name came from the word electron, which means amber. Amber is the yellow fossilized rock you find in tree sap. The Greeks found that if they rubbed amber against wool, lightweight objects such as straw or feathers would start to stick to it. There is speculation that it might have come from a Phoenician word meaning shining light. Nikola Tesla was born during a lightning storm in present-day Croatia, Europe, on July 10, 1856. According to family legend, the midwife said halfway through the birth, "This child will be a child of darkness," to which his mother replied, "No, he will be a child of light." As a child, he began seeing visions accompanied by flashes of light, confusing what was real and what was imaginary. This never went away. The visions sparked his ability to conceive inventions in his head in such detail that he didn't even have to draw them out. He explained how the designs were perfected in his mind in an article in 1919. "Invariably, my device works as I conceive that it should, and the experiment comes out exactly as I planned it. In 20 years, there has not been a single exception." While Tesla is often considered by many a real-life mad scientist, there are still some to this very day that speculate just how much of the man is myth or legend, often citing his accomplishments in the field of power and/or energy as an electric god, yet also acknowledging his work in the field of physics to be almost borderline that of the village idiot. But fortunately for Tesla, given what we know now, that title would first be held by Thomas Edison.
What's that? What's that thing you're working on?
Well, it's a light bulb and...
Light bulb! Light bulb! I invented that. Me! I'm Thomas Edison. I invented the light bulb. What's it do?
It lights up a room using electrical...
Lights up a room using electrical stuff. I was about to say that because I invented it. What are you working on?
It's a phonograph.
Phonograph! I knew that because I invented it. I'm Thomas Edison. I rule!
Look it up. Edison was a
Well, not entirely, but we'll get to that. Franklin joked that the repeated electrical shocks he endured during his studies were useful for, quote, making a vain person humble. If only that were true for Thomas Edison. In his 84 years of life, Edison is credited for 1,093 patents, yet many experts, even today, still speculate on just how many were actually fairly attributed to his work. Thomas Edison didn't learn to talk until he was almost 4 years old. He was described as mentally slow by his teachers, often daydreaming. When X-rays were initially discovered, it was believed that they could cure blindness and other ailments. Tesla warned that X-rays could be dangerous and he refused to conduct medical experiments with them. So Edison got to work right away on human trials and X-ray experimentation. One of his employees, Clarence Daly, was exposed to so much radiation that his arms had to be amputated to save his life. It didn't work though, and he eventually died of mediastinal cancer. Daly is considered to be the first American to die from experimentation with radiation. Finally, Edison invents something original. In addition to killing his assistant, Edison nearly blinded himself by repeatedly firing X-rays at his own eyes. When asked about X-rays later on, this was Edison's reply: "Don't talk to me about X-rays. I am afraid of them." An English scientist by the name of Robert A. Watson was credited with the invention of radar in 1935. This inspired the fact that Nikola Tesla first came up with the idea 18 years before Watson was. Nikola Tesla pitched it to the US Navy at the beginning of World War I, when the world was getting imploded by German U-boats. Unfortunately, Thomas Edison was the head of R&D for the US Navy at the time, and he managed to convince them that it had no practical application in the war. At least, according to this one post by 9gag. I know. Reliable information, right? While I couldn't find anything explicitly stating that Thomas Edison was the head of R&D for the US Navy during World War I couldn't find anything stating that he wasn't either, or who was the head of R&D for the US Navy during World War I at all. So now I'm only left to assume that it was Thomas Edison. Please keep in mind I could be completely wrong here. Any information or source on this would be greatly appreciated, because no matter how much I looked into it, I couldn't find anything. Let's see, where was I? Oh yeah.
Mr. Edison, we're going to use your invention to power the world. And Mr. Tesla, we're going to use yours in the background of Frankenstein movies.
Oh, I wanted that one.
But all jokes aside, Edison did invent the photograph and motion picture camera, so he also had a small part in contributing greatly to society. Yeah, that's where all the nice things I have to say about him end. Well, didn't you say that Edison invented the light bulb? No. I chose my words very carefully. I said he invented the first commercially practical incandescent light bulb. Big distinction. We all know in our history class who Edison is, but why aren't we taught anything about the guy who fixed Edison's problems? Why is he all but absent from modern academia? How is the man that not only won the current war, but whose system is still being used today, not even remembered for it? How did we get here?
Come on, baby, bring it out. Bring out the piston cup. Ka-chika, ka-chika. Yeah! Now that's what I'm talking about. Hey, how come the only one celebrating is me, huh? Where are the girls? Bring on the confetti. Ow! Ow! Easy with the confetti. What's going on? Come on, snap some pictures. I gotta go sign my deal with Dynaco. Ka-chika, say it with me. Ka-chika, ka-chika. Everybody! Ow! What's happening? Hey! This is the chick era!
Nikola Tesla. Now, when I use those two words separately, you probably think of the element of nickel and the automobile company Tesla, but you probably don't think about the inventor, electrical engineer, mechanical engineer, futurist, and, depending on who you ask, alien. Ironically, the only reason you may know him is because he's now well known for being the guy who isn't very well known, paradoxically making him well known. His influence can still be seen today. I mean, hell, even the song you heard at the beginning of this video was made from a band named AC/DC. Even the title of the song itself being Thunderstruck. But before we get into the myth and legend, let's first talk about the man. Nikola Tesla held over 300 patents in his lifetime and was voluntarily chaste, despite numerous women, quote, vying for his affections, some even madly in love with him. Most notably, Robert Underwood Johnson, one of Tesla's closest friends and editor of the prestigious Century magazine's wife, was deeply in love with Tesla. He believed sex inhibited his abilities to think in a scientific manner. It seems his lack of attraction for women, perhaps ironically, made him attractive. He had refused to touch hair and had a, quote, violent aversion against the earrings of women. He was an asexual who even went as far to say, quote, I do not think you can name many great inventions that have been made by married men. He had such severe OCD that he rarely slept, was an extreme germaphobe, hated round objects, was fixated on doing things in sets of 3, had to have 18 napkins on his table during meals, counted his steps whenever he walked, and eventually fell in love with a pigeon. Don't ask. Now, with just this arbitrarily cherry-picked set of strange facts, you'd probably think this man was insane. Well, so did everyone else. Tesla was well aware of this and said, quote, the scientists of today think deeply instead of clearly. One must be sane to think clearly, but one can think deeply and be quite insane. Smart people often sound crazy to ignorant people. Tesla even went as far to say, quote, if the genius of invention were to reveal tomorrow the secret of immortality, of eternal beauty and youth, for which all humanity is aching, the same inexorable agents which prevent a mass from changing suddenly its velocity would likewise resist the force of the new knowledge, until time gradually modifies human thought. Albert Einstein was once asked how it felt to be the smartest man alive. Einstein's reply was, I don't know. You'll have to ask Nikola Tesla. When he contacted cholera as a teen and nearly died, Tesla's father promised to send him to engineering school if he survived, and miraculously he did. He went to study in Austria at the Technical College of Graz, where he was said to work 3 a.m. to 11 p.m. Every day, professors were worried he would die of exhaustion. He could perform calculus in his head and spoke 8 languages. After a gambling addiction, he dropped out and cut ties with his family so they wouldn't find out. It happened so suddenly that people who knew him were only left to assume that he had to have drowned in a lake. Tesla moved around Europe and eventually ended up in Budapest in 1880, working as an electrician at a telephone company. After enduring the unbearably loud noises of the city, he would escape by taking quiet walks alone. While walking around the park, he had an epiphany. The sun set, and it had reminded him of the Gertrude passage. The glow retreats, done is the day of toil. Upon its track to follow, follow soaring. As he uttered these words, he fell to his knees and immediately drew a diagram in the ground. Here, he got the idea of the AC motor, developing a new way of generating electricity using alternate current. In 1882, he settled in Paris to work for the French branch of Thomas Edison's electric company. After 2 years of climbing up the ladder, he was recognized for his exceptional ability and was offered a job by his manager at Edison Machine Works in New York City. He agreed and arrived in America with only 4 cents in his pocket because his money was stolen on the boat ride over. It had been the height of my ambition and the most ardent wish to come into contact with Edison and see America. Accordingly, I undertook the voyage, and after losing my money and tickets and passing through a series of mishaps, including a mutiny in which I nearly lost my life, I landed on these blessed shores. After failed attempts trying to get his alternate current motor produced in Germany, he realized that there was probably only one person in the entire world who could help him with it, and that was Thomas Alva Edison. I was thrilled to the morrow by meeting Edison, who began my American education right then and there. I wanted to have my shoes shined, something I considered below my dignity. Edison said, Tesla, you will shine your shoes yourself and like it. He impressed me tremendously. I shined my shoes and liked it. But Edison had built his system on the direct current system, and any talk of alternating currents was an aggravation to him. A lesson Tesla would soon learn the hard way. Tesla had fulfilled the task of improving Edison's machines. In return, he was promised $50,000, but instead received a mocking chuckle from Thomas Edison, who explained to Tesla that he, quote, didn't understand our American sense of humor.
What? So
that was for nothing!
Needless to say, Tesla quit on the spot straight after and made his own electric company the following year. But his investors showed little interest and decided to take the company and all of Tesla's patents, which they could do because Tesla made the rookie mistake of assigning the patents to the company in exchange for stock, which was now worthless. After losing his own company, Tesla was reduced to digging ditches for $2 a day, just to survive, ironically, for the use of underground cables for Edison Electric. But Nikola wasn't going down without a fight, thus propelling us into what many refer to as In 1887, Tesla invented the induction motor, which ran on alternating current. The motor was the most efficient way to convert electricity into mechanical power. He patented the motor and showed it off the following year at the American Institute of Electrical Engineers, catching the eye of George Westinghouse, a major player in the electric market, who realized Tesla's AC motor might just be what he needed to complete his alternating current system and finally compete against Edison's DC system. So Tesla licensed the patents to Westinghouse for $60,000, and also received stock and royalties. Westinghouse hired him as a consultant for $2,000 a month, which is equivalent to $50,000 today. While Nikola was picking himself back up off the ground, Edison played dirty. He paid $25 to each schoolboy who stole a random family's pet. Once Edison gathered the cats, dogs, etc., he publicly electrocuted them using Tesla's AC current to prove it wasn't safe. Most notably, in 1903, when they electrocuted a circus elephant named Topsy and produced a film about it called Electrocuting an Elephant. In addition to this, Edison aided in the invention of the electric chair by secretly financing it, electrocuting convicted killer William Keller, making sure it used AC current. Tesla responded to this by demonstrating that AC was perfectly fine by famously shooting electric current through his own body to produce light at the 1893 World Fair, the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, which celebrated the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's discovery of America, was to be the world's first fair lighted by electricity. After the Edison Company and Thomas Houston Company merged into what we still have to this day as General Electric, one of the very first things they did was put in a bid for a job at the fair. Their bid was about $1 million, but the competing Westinghouse was $500,000. Judging by how competing the Westinghouse bid was, you can pretty much guess which one the fair ended up going with.
But you can't do this to me. You know how much I sacrificed?
In retaliation, GE refused to sell Westinghouse any of their incandescent Edison light bulbs. They even got a judge to say they couldn't use any one-piece lamps of any description at the fair. Westinghouse practically devised a two-piece stopper lamp by fair time and saved the day. Tesla was finally ready for a chance to make history in Chicago. His large AC generators would supply all of the fair's electricity and prove that his system would work on a large scale. To overcome the impression that AC power was dangerous, Tesla put on remarkable demonstrations. He created a device called the Egg of Columbus to show the rotating magnetic field created by his AC motor. Their success continued when they beat out General Electric again to build the world's first alternating current power plant in Niagara Falls. It was not only a massive success, but the building of the plant also meant that Tesla had just become a pioneer in renewable energy. His statue can still be found at Niagara Falls today. I do not think there is any thrill that can go through the human heart like that felt by the inventor as he sees some creation of the brain unfolding to success. Such emotions make a man forget food, sleep, friends, love, everything. Nikola Tesla had finally won the current war, setting free his inventive ambitions. But, ironically, the very heights of Tesla's success is where this story starts to take a dark turn. Westinghouse's company was running out of money and eventually went $10 million into debt. In 1897, he went to Tesla and asked if his royalties contract for every $2.50 per horsepower generated by AC could be reduced in a desperate attempt to save the company. Tesla was so compelled by compassion for his friend that he ripped up his contract. He was so grateful to Westinghouse for believing in him when no one else would. Tesla willingly walked away from $12 million in royalties, which in today's money would have been around $300 million. Had he held on to those royalties over time, he would have become the wealthiest person on the planet, and the first person with $1 billion net worth. In return for Tesla's compassion, Westinghouse paid Tesla $216,000, or $6 million in today's dollars, for the rights to use his AC patents forever. Now, being financially independent, he set out to create series of laboratories in New York for new projects where he was visited by the rich and famous, including one of the most famous American writers of all time, Mark Twain. But Tesla was ready to work on something bigger, and eventually moved out of New York entirely, and traveled westward until he found land where no one would bother him. He got to work on a literal groundbreaking experiment, tapping into the vibrations and frequency of the Earth. Don't believe me? In an article written by Tesla from August of 1917 and the Electrical Experimenter, he describes an experiment gone wrong one night while working with his assistants in his laboratory. He blew out the dynamo of a power station located about 6 miles away. The now iconic Wardenclyffe Tower was originally intended to be a radio tower, but after Marconi beat Nikola to it, Tesla decided he had bigger fish to fry anyway. In a complete 180, he shifted focus to instead make his electric tower capable of sending and receiving free wireless power. One of the main reasons Nikola Tesla was interested in free energy was because he learned that there was a warming of the planet caused by man-made sources of atmospheric pollutants. Tesla may have even been the first person to consider in detail the effects of the phenomenon now commonly referred to as global warming. Tesla chose to keep the secret from one of his biggest patrons, J.P. Morgan, of what the project project was really about. The plant next to the Wardenclyffe Tower was designed by the architect Stanford White and was constructed under strict secrecy. But eventually word got out, and when J.P. Morgan learned of Tesla's plans of using Wardenclyffe Tower for free energy, he immediately cut funding. As the fable of Icarus goes, he flew too high, too fast. Unfortunately, this story doesn't have a happy ending. The Wardenclyffe Tower was demolished by a new owner. Tesla lost his tower to foreclosure in 1915. The new owner destroyed it, along with Tesla's dreams of expanding limitless free energy for everyone for the purpose of expanding real estate. Nikola, in response, said, "It's not a dream. It's a simple feat of scientific electrical engineering. Only expensive, blind, faint-hearted, doubting world." In his late 70s, he ended up at the New Yorker Hotel, where he would stay for the rest of his life. This was largely thanks to the Westinghouse Electric Company, who decided to pay his rent, as a way to thank him for saving them all those years ago. But considering the dire conditions he was in, if we're speaking in all honesty, the sad reality is that it was probably out of nothing but pity alone. On January 7th, 1943, at the age of 86, Tesla died alone in room 3327 of the New Yorker Hotel. His body was later found by a maid after she had entered Tesla's room, ignoring the "Do Not Disturb" sign that Tesla placed there himself 2 days earlier. The medical examiner, H.W. Wembley, ruled that the cause of death had been coronary thrombosis. It's often this part of the story I ponder on this quote of his. "Out of this war, the greatest since the beginning of history, a new world must be born, a world that would justify the sacrifices offered by humanity. This new world must be a world in which there shall be no exploitation of the weak by the strong, of the good by the evil, where there will be no humiliation of the poor by the violence of the rich, where the products of intellect, science, and art will serve society for the betterment and beautification of life, and not the individuals for achieving wealth. This new world shall not be a world of the downtrodden and humiliated, but of free men and free nations, equal in dignity and respect for man, beaten, bruised, and crowned with insults, suffering the weight of his own talent. The very man who was once called the father of robotics, disregarded and discarded. Others made fortunes off of his inventions, while Tesla ended his life penniless and rejected. Which brings us to today. Wireless communications, wireless internet, but no matter how hard we try, we can never quite reach the final frontier of wireless power. The closest we've ever gotten is solar, and even that is often seen to be leaving room for more. And this, my friends, is sadly where our story ends. Or is it? While we seem to be a long ways off from the wireless wonderland Tesla envisioned, we grow closer with every technological breakthrough each passing day, increasingly heightening the suspicion of just how impossible Tesla's ideas really were. If you're just as skeptical as I am, you've come to the right place, as a moron on YouTube with no investigative experience whatsoever is about to haphazardly throw together 3 theories that could have been the answers we were looking for all along. When J.P. Morgan withheld funding for Wardenclyffe, it destroyed any dying chance of limitless free energy, all because he was scared it wouldn't work. Or what if he was scared that it would work? You know, we all talk about Tesla today, but what we don't talk about is the fact that EVs have existed since the early 1900s. If they had kept making them, it would have made them more universally affordable. But it was also around this time that rumors began to spread that the burgeoning oil companies, who had invested interest in the success of gasoline internal combustion engines, were using strong-arm tactics to intimidate electric car manufacturers. These rumors were strengthened when half of Edison's supposedly fireproof factory buildings mysteriously burned down in 1914. Could Tesla's ideas pose a threat to those who stood to make billions from high-priced oil and expensive energy? Hell, look at what's happening with gas prices right now, especially in the recent wake of Elon Musk's Tesla company, after years of innovating, finally producing vehicles that almost finally reach cost parity with gas cars. It was rumored, but never confirmed, that Nikola Tesla made an electric car, presumably entirely self-sustaining. J.P. Morgan, in response, supposedly told Tesla, if we can't put a meter on it, we don't want it. It was maybe even for this reason that Nikola Tesla famously said, quote, "No free energy device will ever be allowed to reach the market." Now, before you at me, I don't have anything supporting the idea that Edison and Morgan would ever team up. In fact, if anything, it would make far more sense that they wouldn't, considering Morgan wanted no part with him after the embarrassing defeat of DC. But in terms of business, Thomas and Morgan had a common enemy, so it therefore stands to reason that they might have put their differences aside. After all, Morgan was a titan of electricity and in his own right a Goliath in the copper industry. J.P. Morgan not only withheld withheld funding, he also blocked other investors from funding Tesla. Morgan had rubber plantations, which of course also go around wires. He also had copper mines and lumber yards, so it stands to reason he would want telephone poles and wires to sell copper and rubber. After Tesla died, a distant relative of his, named Sava Kasanovich, took steps to get possession of the important documents. Tesla's nephew, Kasanovich, was an up-and-coming Yugoslav diplomat with suspected connections with communists. The last invention Nikola was said to be working on was a death ray. What worse timing than World War II to make such an invention capable of breaching national security implications? After unsuccessfully offering teleforce to both the US and Great Britain in 1934, Tesla began negotiations with the Soviet Union, who reportedly paid him $25,000 for it in 1935. But if Tesla was successful in selling teleforce for such a considerable amount of money, especially during the Great Depression, then why was he still living in relative poverty at the time of his death in 1943? Maybe someone else made the sale and collected the money. It wouldn't be a Nikola Tesla idea if it wasn't stolen. Maybe forces within the US government intervened to halt Tesla from going through with the sale, if it was even made at all. Kasanovich insisted that his uncle's patents be returned to Yugoslavia shortly before his death. The US Office of Property immediately seized all of Tesla's possessions until their ownership could be established. All his technical papers on beam weapons were secretly microfilmed by US military agents during the bombing of Hiroshima. Copies of Tesla's papers on the beam weapon were shipped to Wright Field and Dayton, Ohio. There, a top-secret research program began called Project Nick to find a defense against nuclear missile attack. Ever since then, they've seemed to mysteriously vanish. In 1952, Sava Kasanovich obtained permission from US authorities to return Tesla's estate, still stored in New York, to the inventor's homeland.
Copies of some of his papers were sent to Wright-Patterson in 1945. Not to my facility, not even the predecessor of my facility, but to another part of the base for analysis. And then they vanished. Nobody seems to know what happened to them.
After Soviet Premier Khrushchev announced that the USSR had developed a powerful new weapon, there was concern in the US that the Russians may have access to Tesla's missing papers on beam weapons. In 1978, evidence suggested that the Soviet Union was attempting to build a huge beam weapon near Semipalatinsk in the Ukraine. Soon after, US President Ronald Reagan announced the Strategic Defense Initiative in March 1983, finally taking seriously Tesla's concept for a beam weapon defense shield by the US to combat the destructive threat of atomic weapons. And don't go anywhere, because this is my third and final theory, so get ready to put those tinfoil hats of yours on, because this one's a doozy. As mentioned earlier, according to Tesla, in one of his experiments, he accidentally blew out the dynamo of a power station located about 6 miles away, so we at least have a strong inclination indicating evidence of this contraption working wirelessly, or at least powerful enough to be capable of traveling long distances. Something modern experts still have trouble with today. Just 2 days after his death, the Federal Bureau of Investigation ordered alien property custodia even though Tesla was an American citizen. Nikola Tesla was known to be overly secretive to the point of paranoia in his final years, living in fear that his entire life's work would be stolen from him, even shrouding his Colorado experiments in secrecy. Maybe he was spooked by the foot of big government and needed a place to hide. Or maybe it could have been from Big Brother, secretly holding a gun to his head. He was always rubbing elbows with the rich and powerful. They say to keep your friends close and your enemies closer. In 20 years, there has not been a single exception. Well, there is now. Think about that. After 20 years, there hasn't been a single exception. And now, all of a sudden, one just appears? I'm not buying it. Something else is going on here. Some speculate that because the New Yorker hotel had a secret underground tunnel leading to railroads, Tesla may have chosen to live here in the event he needed to hide any of his inventions. The tunnels were designed as part of an elaborate system of underground passages that connected with other hotels and subway lines. If Tesla did want to hide away his precious technologies at other hotels without detection, this would have provided him the perfect means to do so. Not to mention, it very well could have eventually be used to conduct the Earth's energy from deep underground. When the New Yorker hotel was completed in 1930, it boasted of having the largest private power plant in the US, at the time at least. Its DC generators were capable of producing around 2,200 kilowatts of electrical power, more than 3 times the capacity the hotel required. Some speculate that because his experiments required so much electricity that he chose this hotel deliberately. As mentioned earlier, he was known to have such electrically demanding experiments that it could cause blackouts. Or even more interestingly, if this hotel was chosen for him deliberately. Like putting cheese on a mousetrap, the government got him right where they wanted him. Not only that, but the New Yorker Hotel was built atop the site of the former manufacturer's trust company bank, which agreed to the demolition of their building as long as they were given space inside the New Yorker Hotel for their operations. Perfectly convenient for Tesla to hide his papers. Maybe the underground tunnels served another purpose. And even more interesting is that this hotel just so happens to be nearly 600 feet tall, almost the exact height of Wardenclyffe Tower. And keep in mind, he couldn't get to finish his work at Wardenclyffe due to a lack of funding. What if he was secretly trying to replicate it here, not requiring any funding? The medical examiner, H.W. Wembley, ruled that the cause of death had been coronary thrombosis. 2 days later, the Federal Bureau of Investigation ordered alien property custodian to seize Tesla's belongings. A bit strange that the medical examiner would rule a cause of death conveniently untestable and unprovable. At least I assume it must have been during this time. And what better convenient timing, considering this was only 2 days after the FBI raided his house, even though Tesla was an American citizen. Of course, he was born in what is now Croatia, but he still became a fully naturalized US citizen.
According to very qualified, educated sources I met here, the FBI and the OSS had the rooms just down the hall from here and were monitoring Tesla closely, perhaps waiting for him to pass.
That's intriguing. Joe said that there was a possibility that there were FBI agents or OSS agents that were living on the same hallway with Tesla. That makes me think that he's being watched the whole time. Now, if this is true, then they would have known instantly when he was dead. They had all the time in the world, 3 days probably, that they could have gone in and taken documents, changed documents, done whatever they wanted to.
What I think is interesting is that one of the files says that a Mr. Doty and a Mr. Fitzgerald accompanied Kasanovich, and they were supposedly hotel managers. But there's a Mr. Doty who was in war intelligence, and Blois Fitzgerald, who was an Army representative who worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And those two guys have the exact same last names. So it seems to me it's very possible it was Army intelligence, Navy intelligence.
Also, those names are not of any general managers at the time.
You know that.
I have tons and tons of documents advertising with Frank L. Andrews, general manager, signed.
If Frank L. Andrews was the manager of the New Yorker Hotel at the time of Nikola Tesla's death in 1943, then just who were Doty and Fitzgerald? More importantly, what exactly were they doing there? Could it be they were following the orders of government physicist John G. Trump, the man hired by the Office of Alien Property to collect all of Tesla's belongings, including some 80 trunks filled with scientific papers, and then evaluate them for their possible strategic importance?
Most wars that have been waged in the past years or even decades have been about the control of what provides energy. Or to put it in a more frank sense, what if there was no control? A man named John G. Trump, a professor at MIT and a well-known electrical engineer serving as technical aide to the National Defense Research Committee, was called to analyze Tesla's items, which were being held in custodia after an investigation. Trump's report concluded that there was nothing to worry about. Interestingly enough, John G. Trump was actually former US President Donald Trump's uncle. He was also a physicist who had been working for the National Defense Research Committee, which was an organization dedicated to scientific research for matters of warfare. It was for this very reason that the US Office of Alien Custodian assigned John G. Trump to gather up all the deceased scientists' belongings. Despite what Tesla claimed were 80 trunks filled with scientific papers, Trump claimed only 30 trunks were found. And these, according to his report, contained, quote, Nothing of strategic importance of scientific value.
Liar!
Was the discrepancy part of a larger strategy to keep the value of Tesla's missing papers a secret? This may even explain where the government gets all of its technology to test unidentified flying objects, under the intentionally misleading disguise that it came from aliens to keep our eye off the ball. After all, the supposed extraterrestrial events in Roswell, New Mexico only happened 4 years after his death. Discovery or distraction? Too many conveniences, if you ask me. There is not even a grave to visit. He was cremated and his ashes are now in the Nikola Tesla Museum in Belgrade, Serbia, where they are displayed in an urn. And finally, I'll leave you with this one last quote from the man himself. If we use our fuel to get our power, we are living in our capital and exhausting it rapidly. This method is barbarous and wantonly wasteful, and will have to be stopped in the interest of coming generations. The heat of the sun's rays represents an immense amount of energy, vastly in excess of water power. The sun's energy, controlled to create lakes and rivers for motive purposes and transformation of arid deserts into fertile land.
If you Google Nikola Tesla, you get 34 million results. It's basically just 4 pictures. Google Thomas Edison, and you get over 64 million results. Twice as many as Tesla.
Nikola Tesla, the man who has been somewhat credited with the invention and discovery of alternating current, neon and fluorescent lights, X-rays, the radio, remote controls, bioelectricity, biophysics, the Tesla coil, and also proposed plans to provide free electricity to everyone, declined the Nobel Prize. There was a rumor that Tesla refused because he would have had to share his prize with Edison. Even when he's credited, it's a backhanded compliment. Hell, I didn't even mention the insane situation regarding who is considered the creator of the radio. There are some who speculate that the Wardenclyffe Tower was made for nothing more than Tesla to take advantage of investors, but I just don't see it. If that were true, I don't think he would have tore up his contract, or said, quote, "Money does not represent such a value as men have placed upon it. All my money has been invested into experiments, with which I have made new discoveries, enabling mankind to have a little easier life." He didn't care about money or fame, but unfortunately he failed to protect his commercial interests and had to sell his tower to cover his debt, making his existence seen as nothing more than a cautionary tale of what not to do when you want to make the world a better place, which of course is making the world a better place. And it's my hope that we can give this man the recognition he deserves, and look after the preservation of his last dying wish of a self-sustaining civilization, ironically started after a company named after him. And I'll leave you with the very last known words Nikola Tesla ever said, which I even have to hold back tears just to recite. "All these years that I had spent in the service of mankind brought me nothing but insults and humiliation."
I will finish what you started.